Warning: this video is a Claybowser production. The content that follows reflects publicly available information, long-term community discussion, and personal observation as a player and observer of Natural Selection 2. This is not an attack on Unknown Worlds Entertainment, Crafton, or the remaining NS2 community. The game received over a decade of active development, and the passion behind it is real. This video exists to document history and analyze design and community outcomes as they unfolded. If you find the analysis fair or valuable, consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment. However, be warned, this is a critical examination, not a celebration, and it may challenge how you remember the game. The downfall of Natural Selection 2 and what can be learned. A Claybowser production, proudly powered by AI. Chapter 1. A cult classic that almost made it. Natural Selection 2 is one of those games people don't just like, they defend. Because to understand NS2, you have to understand where it came from. This wasn't a corporate concept. It wasn't designed by committee. It began as a mod. A strange, ambitious multiplayer mod for Half-Life that asked a question no one else was asking at the time. What if first-person shooting and real-time strategy existed in the same match? That origin matters because it shaped everything that came after. The original Natural Selection mod was rough, unforgiving, and brilliant. One player commanded from above, everyone else fought on the ground. Victory required coordination, not reflexes alone. And somehow it worked. The mod attracted a small but fiercely loyal audience, players willing to tolerate complexity, imbalance, and learning curves because the payoff was something no other multiplayer game offered. This wasn't mass appeal, this was passion, and that passion is what made NS2 possible at all. Natural Selection 2 didn't get made because a publisher believed in it. It got made because players did. NS2 was funded through early access before that model was normalized. Fans paid not for a finished product but for the idea that the sequel deserved to exist. People bought in early. They tested broken builds. They gave feedback. They trusted the developers. That kind of funding creates a powerful relationship, but also an unspoken contract. This game is ours. And when a game belongs to its community, that can be both its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. NS2 wasn't trying to modernize the concept, it was trying to perfect it. Marines versus aliens, structure versus adaptation, discipline versus chaos. The commander role remained central, an RTS player managing resources, map control, and tech progression in real time while relying entirely on human teammates to execute. No bots, no safety nets, no hand-holding. NS2 assumed players wanted mastery, not comfort. When NS2 launched, most multiplayer games were moving toward accessibility. Lower skill floors, shorter matches, clear reward loops. NS2 rejected all of that. It doubled down on complexity. It embraced failure as part of learning. It demanded communication and accountability. And for the players who came from the mod or who funded the game early, that wasn't a flaw. It was the point. This wasn't a product. It was a continuation of a legacy. Because NS2 came from a mod and was paid for by its fans, the community didn't just play it, they owned it emotionally. Being good at NS2 meant something. Knowing build orders mattered. Understanding timings mattered. Mistakes were visible and remembered. That intensity created loyalty, but it also created walls. New players weren't just learning a game. They were entering a culture that already believed it had paid its dues. This is the paradox of Natural Selection 2. Its origin as a mod gave it creativity. Its fan-funded development gave it independence. Its uncompromising design gave it depth. But those same factors also locked it in place. NS2 wasn't designed to grow, it was designed to remain true. And in modern multiplayer games, Staying true without adapting is often the beginning of the end. Next, we need to talk about the moment competitive trust collapsed entirely. Chapter 2: The Hive Skill Bug That Broke Competitive Integrity. If you ask longtime NS2 players what started undermining competitive play, most won't blame the developers first. They'll blame the Hive Skill bug. Hive Skill was NS2 version of ELO, the system meant to measure skill, balance teams, and make matches fair. But there was a catch. Hive Skill wasn't stored on a central server, it was collected and maintained by a third-party player-hosted server, with the team score menu mod connecting to it. That setup made the system vulnerable and, for some, exploitable. Hive Skill tracked your ability in real time. Win a match, your Hive Skill goes up. Lose, it goes down. It dictated matchmaking fairness and created a sense of progression. It was supposed to reward skill and make each round meaningful. But because the server was community-run, the data could be inconsistent, and sometimes players randomly experienced Hive Skill resets. Here's where things get shady. Players sometimes had their Hive Skill reset to 0 mid-session. Not by accident, at least not always. When this happened, these zeroed players could dominate rounds because the system temporarily treated them as total noobs, letting them stack teams unfairly or skew match balance. Matches became chaotic. Teams were unbalanced. Trust evaporated because nobody knew if the bug was genuine or being manipulated. NS2 competitive ecosystem depended on Hive Skill. It was the backbone of team balance. It was the foundation of ranked fairness. It was supposed to prevent stomps and reward mastery. But when some players randomly had their Hive Skill reset, everything broke. Veterans suddenly faced matches they couldn't trust. Beginners were caught in unfair situations. Matches became unpredictable chaos, sometimes thrilling, often frustrating. The integrity of every round came into question. The Hive Skill bug, or exploit, fueled discussion, accusations, and resentment. Forums debated whether resets were bugs or intentional cheating. Streams showed zeroed players crushing skilled teams. Tournaments and pickup games were undermined by players exploiting resets to dominate. Because the system was community-run, there was no official oversight. No patch or admin could immediately prevent it. It became a gray area of manipulation disguised as a bug. Fixing Hive Skill wasn't simple. It wasn't just code, it was architecture. Hive Skill relied on third-party servers hosted by players. The team score menu mod connected to these servers in real time. Any patch needed cooperation across multiple independent servers or a complete redesign. Meanwhile, rounds continued to be dominated by players exploiting resets. By the time the developers could respond, trust in the system had already eroded. The Hive Skill bug undermined competitive credibility more than any matchmaking flaw could. It blurred the line between bug and exploit. It created suspicion in every game. It made players question whether skill even mattered. NS2 ecosystem was resilient, but competitive integrity is fragile. Once players believe a system can be manipulated, even loyal fans start disengaging. The Hive Skill incident wasn't just about code failing, it was about community trust failing. And that set the stage for the next major problem: veterans turning into gatekeepers, enforcing an unwelcoming culture that pushed newcomers away. Chapter 3: When Veterans Turn Gatekeepers. If the Hive Skill bug undermined competitive integrity, the veteran players of NS2 did something else. They shaped a culture that pushed new players out. It's a story familiar to multiplayer games. The experienced become gatekeepers. In NS2, it was intensified by its complexity, its mod roots, and its fan-funded identity. NS2 was anything but simple. Movement mechanics, alien evolution, commander strategies, tech trees all had steep learning curves. New players struggled, they failed. Veterans noticed. For some, this wasn't malicious, it was pride. They had earned their skill, and the culture around the game reinforced that. Hazing became common on some servers and in private Discord groups. Mistakes weren't just corrected, they were mocked. Players could be targeted for poor performance, sometimes even outside the game. There are rumors of secret Discord groups coordinating harassment, but there's no concrete evidence. Still, the perception created fear. Newcomers felt watched and judged constantly. Complex gameplay was intimidating enough. Social dynamics made it worse. Beginners joined hoping to learn. Instead, they faced impatience, elitism, and sometimes subtle targeting. Even on casual servers, veterans dominated communication channels and criticized choices loudly. This environment drove many new players away before they ever fully experienced the game. Onboarding wasn't broken, it was hostile. Gatekeeping fractured the community. Servers and Discord groups became tight-knit bubbles. Competition thrived inside these spaces, but outsiders were often excluded or ridiculed. Knowledge was hoarded. Mentorship was scarce. Meanwhile, casual servers, like the ultimate noob server, lost attention and active players. The more insular veteran spaces became, the fewer fresh players joined. Momentum slowed. Multiplayer games need a balance between veterans and newcomers. Veterans create high-level gameplay. New players sustain the population. NS2 culture favored veterans overwhelmingly. It rewarded skill, but punished patience and guidance. The imbalance didn't kill the game immediately, but it planted seeds for decline. Players shared anecdotes. Commanders thrown into matches without guidance, blamed for losses. Marines ridiculed for minor mistakes. Discord groups allegedly coordinating harassment, though nothing was confirmed. For new player, NS2 felt less like a game and more like a test, sometimes a cruel one. The veterans preserved the game's competitive standards, but in doing so, they undermined its growth. Next, we explore the death of the ultimate noob server, the beginner-friendly space that once nurtured new players. Chapter 4: The Death of the Ultimate Noob Server. If Chapter 3 was about veterans gatekeeping, Chapter 4 is about what happens when the one space meant to welcome new players disappears. In NS2, the Ultimate Noob Server wasn't just a name, it was a sanctuary. A place where beginners could experiment, fail, and learn without being crushed by experienced players or secretive Discord groups. Its closure marked the beginning of a steep decline in casual engagement. NS2 relied heavily on three main community-run server entities. Some had multiple servers, each hosting different game modes and skill brackets. For casual newcomers, the Ultimate Noob Server was the default destination. It attracted the largest portion of casual players, serving as the first stop for anyone new to the game. Its existence made onboarding possible. Its disappearance made it nearly impossible. Unlike other servers, the Ultimate Noob Server emphasized low-pressure matches, friendly moderation, accessible matchmaking. For beginners, a culture of learning rather than gatekeeping. Players could make mistakes, experiment with alien evolution or commander roles, and actually enjoy losing without judgment. It was literally a haven. Then it died. Whether from administrative issues, lack of funding, or declining volunteer support, the server shut down permanently. Suddenly, all casual and beginner players were forced to rely on the two remaining major community servers. This wasn't just a redistribution, it fundamentally changed the player experience. One of the remaining servers introduced a paid service, prioritized slots that allowed players to skip queues. This created a subtle barrier for new or casual players who were now competing with veterans who could pay to join without waiting. The other server retained free access, but it wasn't beginner-friendly. The balance that the Ultimate Noob Server maintained was gone. The combination of pay-for-priority and lack of beginner-focused spaces discouraged casual engagement. Without a safe space to fail, learn, and grow, new players struggled. Beginner mistakes were punished in public matches. No low-pressure servers meant fewer people dared to experiment. Casual players left, shrinking the player base further. In essence, NS2 lost its gateway for new blood. The remaining servers became echo chambers for veteran players. Newcomers either left or got absorbed into existing hierarchies. The casual population dwindled, while competitive and hardcore veterans dominated queues. The ultimate noob server's absence amplified every problem NS2 already had: gatekeeping, toxicity, and dependence on community-run infrastructure. The death of the ultimate noob server illustrates a key lesson: multiplayer longevity depends on beginner accessibility. NS2 didn't fail because of bad design alone. It failed because it slowly eliminated the spaces that nurtured new players. Next, we'll examine the game's high skill ceiling and how it conflicted with player retention, further straining the community. Chapter 5: Skill Ceiling vs. Player Retention. By now, NS2 had already started losing its footing. The Hive Skill bug shook competitive trust, veterans had become gatekeepers, and the ultimate noob server, the beginner haven, was gone. But another factor quietly amplified the problem: the skill ceiling. NS2 wasn't just a game you could pick up and play, it was a game you had to master, and mastery took time, patience, and dedication. The skill ceiling refers to the maximum level of expertise a player can achieve in a game. NS2 ceiling was enormous. Movement mechanics were precise and punishing. Alien evolution choices required deep strategy and timing. Commander roles demanded multitasking akin to real-time strategy. Team coordination was mandatory. Solo heroics often led to failure. For experienced players, this was exhilarating. For newcomers, it was intimidating. High skill ceilings make a game rewarding, but only if the entry path is accessible. NS2 had no real buffer. Beginners faced veterans almost immediately. Mistakes were punished harshly. Progress felt slow. For veterans, every win was meaningful. For beginners, every loss felt like a wall. This created an ecosystem where the fun curve for new players was extremely steep. Retention is key to multiplayer longevity. If players don't feel like they're learning or enjoying themselves early on, they leave. NS2's steep skill ceiling made it almost impossible to enjoy casual play after the ultimate noob server died. Casual players dwindled. Experienced players remained, but the influx of fresh players slowed to a trickle. Without a healthy base of beginners, the community slowly aged, and the population plateaued. Players often shared experiences like spending hours as a Marine only to die repeatedly to skilled aliens, trying to play commander and feeling overwhelmed by resource management and teammate communication, abandoning games after a single demoralizing match because progress felt invisible. The high ceiling created a gap between those who could play effectively and those who couldn't, even if they were committed. Humans are wired to enjoy achievable challenges. NS2 offered incredible mastery rewards, but only after significant failure and repetition. Without gentle onboarding, friendly servers, or supportive communities, that reward often felt out of reach. New players felt frustration, veterans felt superiority, and the social divide widened. The high skill ceiling didn't exist in isolation. Combine it with Hive Skill bugs destabilizing competitive trust, veteran gatekeeping, the death of the ultimate noob server, and you have a perfect storm. A game could be brilliant, fun, and unique, but still lose its player base if the entry curve is too steep. NS2 demanded mastery, but mastery came at a cost. The next chapter explores toxicity as a feature, not a bug, showing how the combination of complex mechanics and high skill floors amplified hostility and burnout among the remaining players. Chapter 6: Toxicity as a feature, not a bug. By now, NS2 problems were piling up. Hive skill bugs undermined competitive trust. Veteran gatekeeping made new players hesitant. The ultimate noob server was gone, and the skill ceiling left beginners overwhelmed. But there was another, less tangible issue, one that wasn't a bug in the code but a byproduct of the game itself: toxicity. In NS2, toxicity wasn't just occasional, it was amplified by the game's design. NS2 demanded communication and coordination. Every team member mattered. Commanders relied on accurate information from the field. Marines and aliens had to execute precise strategies. When one player failed, it affected everyone. When mistakes happened, the natural reaction wasn't just oops, it was blame. The game created high-stakes interactions, where stress was baked into the experience. NS2 reliance on voice chat, pinging, and real-time coordination turned every match into a social experiment. Miscommunication caused losses. Misplays were immediately visible. Strategies depended on hundreds of micro-decisions executed perfectly. For veterans, this was exhilarating. For new players, it was terrifying. And for everyone, it became a pressure cooker for conflict. Toxicity spread quickly in this environment. Complaints in chat became arguments. Public blame turned teammates against each other. Rumors of secret Discord groups or targeted harassment added fear. The problem wasn't just bad players, it was game design enabling social friction. Every loss could be personalized, every failure visible, every mistake amplified. This wasn't just frustrating, it burned players out. Beginners left after a few matches. Casual veterans avoided public servers. Competitive veterans felt pressure to perform every round. NS2 created a vicious cycle. High skill required, mistakes punished socially. Trust in systems like Hive Skill shaky, and new players scared away. Toxicity wasn't incidental, it was built into how the game demanded interaction. There were no easy solutions. Moderation was volunteer-driven, inconsistent, and limited to a few servers. Game mechanics ensured blame would always exist. Toxicity emerged even in well-intentioned communities. It wasn't a matter of adding rules, it was baked into asymmetric, coordination-heavy multiplayer gameplay. As a result, NS2 became self-selecting, only the most resilient or dedicated veterans stayed. Casual and beginner players left or avoided interaction. Remaining servers skewed heavily toward experienced, competitive players. The social environment narrowed, reinforcing elitism and gatekeeping. Toxicity didn't just affect enjoyment, it shaped who played at all. In NS2, high-skill mechanics, community-run servers, and Hive Skill created a unique ecosystem, but the social costs were enormous. Even with all this, the game had marketing and visibility, yet that alone couldn't save it. Next, we'll explore marketing without momentum and why exposure couldn't compensate for deep systemic issues. Chapter 7: Marketing Without Momentum. By this point, NS2 had already hit major internal roadblocks: Hive skill instability, veteran gatekeeping, the loss of the ultimate noob server, high skill ceilings, and a culture rife with toxicity. Yet externally, the game was still visible. It had marketing, exposure, even hype, but that wasn't enough to save it. This chapter explores why marketing alone couldn't overcome structural problems. NS2 had several advantages many indie multiplayer games lacked. It had a fanbase from the original Half-Life mod, giving word-of-mouth credibility. Early access brought visibility to Steam and gaming media. Devs occasionally released trailers, patch notes, and updates that caught attention. At first glance, it looked like NS2 had momentum, but marketing is surface-level appeal. You can attract new players with trailers, ads, and coverage, but if the core experience is unwelcoming, they won't stay. NS2 problems were internal. Beginner onboarding was gone with the ultimate noob server. Hive skill inconsistencies made matches unpredictable. Toxic communities made casual play stressful. high skill ceilings intimidated new players. No amount of marketing could compensate for these issues. NS2 marketing often reached the wrong audience. Casual gamers saw trailers and early access hype, expecting accessible play. They joined only to face overwhelming skill requirements and hostile communities. Their disappointment fueled negative reviews and early churn. Meanwhile, hardcore veterans already knew about the game. They didn't need marketing. The result: marketing was drawing players into a system that was unlikely to retain them. NS2 was heavily community-driven, with servers, Hive Skill, and mods maintained by volunteers. Even the best ad campaign couldn't fix the reliance on community infrastructure. If the servers were unwelcoming, buggy, or dominated by gatekeeping, new players left and marketing exposure couldn't retain them. The game's visibility was out of sync with its actual player experience. On paper, NS2 seemed successful. It had coverage, an active Discord, and loyal veterans. But numbers don't tell the whole story. New player retention was low. Casual matches were declining. The population was aging. Marketing gave the illusion of growth, but internal systemic issues were quietly bleeding players away. The NS2 case highlights a key lesson in multiplayer design. Marketing can attract attention. Marketing cannot fix design flaws, social dynamics, or infrastructure problems. Even with exposure, a game can fail if the internal ecosystem, servers, community onboarding, is broken. NS2 had the visibility but not the momentum. Internal challenges were bad, but things were about to get worse. 2 years ago, NS2 Studio was bought by a Korean company, and mass firings of the original developers followed. Next, we'll explore how the buyout and studio collapse sent shockwaves through the community. Chapter 8: The Korean Buyout and Studio Collapse. Up to this point, NS2 had been struggling internally. Hive skill issues, veteran gatekeeping, the loss of beginner-friendly servers, high skill ceilings, and a culture of toxicity. But in October 2021, a new challenge arrived, one that would shake the foundation of the game. Unknown Worlds Entertainment, the studio behind NS2, was acquired by Krafton, a South Korean developer known for PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Krafton is a major player in the gaming world. They are known primarily for PUBG, a global hit. They focus on large-scale, competitive multiplayer titles with heavy monetization strategies. For many fans, Krafton represented resources, stability, and the promise of new growth. But for NS2, the acquisition would mean something very different. Almost immediately, the buyout led to a massive shift in priorities. Key NS2 developers were let go. Development focus moved away from the community-driven vision of Unknown Worlds. Planned updates, bug fixes, and community engagement slowed or stopped entirely. For the players, it was a clear signal. The people who understood the game best were gone. The NS2 community was vocal about the acquisition. Forums and Discord channels debated Krafton's intentions. Many feared that the corporate approach would ignore the delicate ecosystem NS2 relied on. Some veterans hoped for resources to stabilize servers, but expectations quickly dimmed. The trust that remained in Unknown Worlds was eroded almost overnight. The buyout didn't just remove developers, it amplified existing issues. Hive skill bugs persisted without fixes. Toxicity and gatekeeping intensified as oversight disappeared. Beginner accessibility continued to decline, with no ultimate noob server revival in sight. In short, the acquisition didn't fix NS2, it accelerated its decline. Krafton's focus was on scalability, monetization, and competitive engagement. Paid services, server prioritization, and player metrics became more important. Community nuance, like beginner-friendly servers and volunteer moderation, was largely deprioritized. For a game built around small, dedicated communities, this was a jarring misalignment. The studio collapse and buyout left NS2 in limbo. Development slowed drastically. Community confidence fell. Remaining servers became the sole hubs of player activity, but without official support, they couldn't sustain growth. What had once been a promising, fan-funded game became a product kept alive primarily by nostalgia and community dedication. Despite everything, NS2 still had a small, passionate player base. In the next chapter, we'll explore how nostalgia kept the game alive, and why passion alone couldn't prevent the slow decay of its ecosystem. Chapter 9. A game kept alive by nostalgia. After years of internal struggles, Hive skill instability, veteran gatekeeping, the loss of beginner-friendly servers, high skill ceilings, toxicity, and the craft and buyout, NS2 still managed to survive. But survival came not from innovation or marketing, it came from nostalgia. Players who loved the game, sometimes for over a decade, kept it alive. The player base is small but dedicated, veterans who remember NS2 heyday, often logging in weekly to relive the experience. Hardcore communities running private servers and mods, streamers and content creators who keep visibility alive. For these players, the game isn't just about mechanics, it's about memory, friendships, and the thrill of old matches. With official development slowed after the craft and buyout, the game relied entirely on community-run infrastructure. Servers maintained by volunteers mods to connect Hive skill and stats discords for matchmaking, events, and casual discussion. Without these dedicated players, NS2 would have vanished entirely. But this reliance also meant the ecosystem was fragile. Any disruption could dramatically reduce active players. Nostalgia can keep a community alive, but it can't grow it. Newcomers are rare, often deterred by steep skill ceilings and hostile servers. Casual and beginner-friendly spaces are gone, making onboarding nearly impossible. Players often return for memories rather than long-term engagement. The result, a small but consistent population, enough to maintain servers but not enough to revive the game fully. You'll see posts like, "I've been playing NS2 since the Half-Life mod days. Nothing else feels the same." Servers hosting nostalgia nights with old maps and classic rules. Veterans organizing unofficial tournaments just for fun, without expecting profit or growth. Passion is what keeps NS2 online, but it's not scalable. Nostalgia sustains a game emotionally, but it can't fix systemic issues. Hive skill bugs and exploit opportunities persist. Toxicity remains in veteran-heavy servers. Casual player retention is near zero. Without structural improvements, the game can't expand beyond its devoted core. It's ironic. NS2 survives because people love it enough to maintain it, but that very survival masks the fact that it's failing as a multiplayer ecosystem. Players keep servers running, host mods, and organize events, but the population slowly ages, and the game never attracts enough new players to replace them. It's a community held together by memory, not design. So NS2 exists today, but it's a cautionary tale. Passion alone cannot sustain a multiplayer game indefinitely. Next, we'll conclude with what NS2 teaches about multiplayer design and why adaptation is key to longevity. Chapter 10. What NS2 teaches about multiplayer design. After exploring NS2 rise, struggles, and survival, we arrive at the final chapter. NS2 didn't fail because it was a bad game. It failed because it refused to adapt to the needs of its community and the realities of multiplayer design. This chapter examines the lessons we can learn from its story. NS2 relied heavily on community-run servers, Hive skill tracking, and mods. Volunteer servers kept the game alive. Mods and third-party tools handled matchmaking and stats. But this decentralized model is fragile. Any disruption, like the loss of the ultimate NOOB server, can have outsized effects. Lesson: if your multiplayer game depends on community systems, build robust, official support to prevent collapse. NS2 high skill ceiling and veteran-dominated culture made onboarding nearly impossible. Beginner-friendly servers disappeared. Gatekeeping and toxic communities discouraged learning. Without easy entry points, new players leave before they can grow. Lesson: a healthy multiplayer ecosystem requires spaces that nurture beginners. NS2 coordination-heavy gameplay created stress and blame. Hive skill bugs undermined trust. Team dependence amplified conflicts. Toxicity became systemic, not incidental. Lesson: game mechanics influence social behavior. Multiplayer designers must anticipate the social impact of their systems. NS2 had marketing, early access hype, and visibility, but exposure couldn't compensate for systemic issues. Technical instability, community gatekeeping, steep learning curves. Lesson: marketing attracts players, but retention comes from the actual gameplay experience. The Crafton BUYOUT highlighted what happens when a game stops evolving with its community. Original devs left. Community priorities were ignored. Monetization and scaling took precedence over ecosystem health. Lesson: multiplayer games must adapt to player needs and community feedback. Stagnation is fatal. Nostalgia and dedicated veterans kept NS2 alive. Servers ran communities, persisted mod tools continued to function, but passion alone cannot grow the player base or fix structural problems. Lesson: dedicated fans sustain a game, but long-term success requires scalable systems and continuous development. NS2 story is a cautionary tale for multiplayer design. High skill ceilings must be balanced with beginner access. Community systems need official support. Game mechanics shape social dynamics. Marketing cannot replace retention. Adaptation is not optional, it's essential. Natural Selection 2 remains a beloved game, a cult classic preserved by its fans, but its decline shows the fine line between passion-driven survival and long-term multiplayer success. And that's the story of NS2, the lessons, the legacy, and the downfall of a game that almost redefined asymmetric multiplayer. Chapter 11, CBM, the Community Balance Mod. At a certain point, official development stopped. Unknown Worlds Entertainment ended active development of Natural Selection 2 after more than 10 years and over 100 updates. The announcement was respectful, thankful, and final. The game would remain playable with matched play servers hosted, but the future of NS2 was now in the hands of the community, and the community responded. CBM, the Community Balance Mod, began as a response to long-standing balance complaints. Players felt the publisher was no longer adjusting the game to match high-level feedback, so instead of waiting, they built their own solution. At first, CBM focused on balance changes. Numbers were tweaked, mechanics were adjusted, but over time, CBM evolved into something much larger. New features were added. Exo-suits gained blowtorches. New alien and marine units appeared, such as fortress crags and specialized arcs. Entire strategies emerged that simply did not exist in vanilla NS2. In many ways, CBM became the closest thing to a sequel that Natural Selection 2 will ever have. For veteran players, this was exciting. The game felt fresh again. There were new metas to learn and new systems to master. CBM gave experienced players a reason to keep logging in after official development had ended. But it came with a serious trade-off. CBM made an already difficult game even more complex, and one change in particular had a major impact on new players. The removal of Carapace Shell. Carapace Shell was a defensive power-up that helped newer players survive longer. At high levels, it was considered overpowered. But for beginners, it was often the difference between learning the game and quitting it. In CBM, Carapace Shell was removed or heavily altered in the name of balance. For veterans, this made sense. For new players, it made the game even harsher. Deaths came faster. mistakes were punished more severely. The learning curve became steeper than ever. The player base fractured further. Some servers ran CBM, others stayed vanilla. Each version required different knowledge, different habits, and different expectations. New players had to choose between two versions of an already unforgiving game. CBM did not revive natural selection 2. What it did was preserve high-level play. It kept veterans engaged. It extended the lifespan of competitive matches, but it did little to improve accessibility or onboarding. The game remained NOOB-unfriendly, now with even more systems to understand. CBM became the spiritual successor to NS2, not because it saved the community, but because it accepted reality. Natural selection 2 was no longer growing, it was enduring, and CBM reflects that truth perfectly. A passionate community, brilliant ideas, constant iteration, but a game designed for mastery, not for newcomers. And in the end, that may be the most honest chapter in the story of Natural Selection 2. As of now, matched play in Natural Selection 2 is effectively impossible. There simply are not enough players. On weekdays, you're lucky to see even one full server. On weekends, you might see 2 or 3 at peak hours. The game is frequently on sale for around $1, and even at that price, it struggles to attract new players. That alone speaks volumes. Natural Selection 2 is no longer competing for relevance. It is surviving quietly, sustained by veterans, nostalgia, and community effort. And while it remains a fascinating and ambitious game, its population numbers make one thing clear. The downfall is no longer theoretical. It has already happened.